Stalked in the woods, I experienced this a few years ago that to this day gives me a shiver. I have been camping, solo backpacking and hunting my whole life in Oregon, and felt comfortable in the woods and have a deep respect for nature. A few years ago my wife, daughter, and 2 German shepherds went camping north of Mt. Jefferson, Oregon. I have included the coordinates of our campsite, which we found to be the perfect setup for us and our 2 dogs who need the privacy since they are intimidating to other dog owners and can be loud when spooked. It was not an established campsite, just a nice horseshoe off a USFS road that had flat ground full trees, and a fire pit. The first night my daughter wanted to sleep by herself in a 2-man tent right next to ours. It was maybe 2 feet away from my wife's tent. We made the male German shepherd sleep, Guts is his name, with her in the tent. That whole first night neither my wife and I could sleep. We both heard footsteps and they were heavy, not like typical forest critters scampering around the night. I was well armed because I was paranoid from reading recently before departing about a dad in California who was shot and killed in a tent next to his 2 infant daughters. Needless to say, both my wife and I had 2 pistols and my rifle with me. The dogs are great at detection, and that is why I felt my daughter could sleep alone, because Guts is completely fearless and nothing would lay a hand on her without a battle to the death. All in all, nothing but bad vibes and loud footsteps occurred that night, which I ultimately decided was deer or maybe some elk. Day 2. Morning, we go for a walk down the road and maybe 300 feet away see the circle area in the photo. I see an abandoned road where a rusted gate was missing, was covered in vegetation. Something of blue color caught my eye and Guts immediately takes off running down this abandoned road. My heart begins to race because I think it's another family camping like us and he is going to get himself shot or scare some innocent people to death, so I chase after him as fast as I can and the rest follow. He stops after 20 feet into the road and me yelling his name, but I have covered just enough distance to see that there is nobody there and something is off about the sight. I yell, "Hello, is anyone there? Sorry about the dog." I got no response. My curiosity gets the best of me and I have to see what the site conditions were. As I get closer I know something is wrong. It had all the necessities for a campsite, including a cooler, propane burner, tent, blankets, folding table, but every single item had been completely destroyed, smashed, and torn from what appeared to be claw marks. We all walked around in circles, puzzled why anyone would leave all their camping gear behind, including an expensive REI tent. I figured, well, someone left in a hurry and animals got to the rest as the only logical explanation. Still, a propane tank and cooler were flattened by something, and it certainly wasn't snowpack with tree coverage in that spot. As the afternoon rolls and me and my daughter are playing bocce ball at the campsite and my wife goes walking maybe 70 foot north to do her business. I do not have direct line of sight on her, but all of a sudden I see Guts make a mad dash straight towards her. Normally he would always be with me unless he is called over, and she didn't call for him. His speed and focus caught my attention and I knew something weird was happening, so I ran over there and my wife starts jogging at me and I immediately draw my pistol. Guts has completely continued running into the forest another 100 feet before I call him and he stopped. My other dog Leah, who never misses the opportunity to be the pack leader, is not taking point. I have had her for now 7 years and this was the first time in her life she refused to leave my daughter's side. She was full hair raised and attached to us at the hip. Again, anytime we hike or play, Leah is up front bossing everything in her path and pauses to look to see where we are and continues. I asked my wife what happened and she said, "I was trying to pee and all of a sudden I felt all my hairs raise. I know someone was watching me, and then I saw Guts running towards me and I just got up to move towards you." We spent 10 minutes looking for signs of anything and saw no trails, broken branches, nothing to point to what and where something went. We decide we are spending one more night since it's too late to pack up and drive, but we will all be in the big tent together. Before we go to bed I put a rope with a makeshift coin alarm around the perimeter of our campsite. I used a mint can and some coins and keys from our truck and zip-tied it so anything hitting the rope gave a little jingle. Very unsophisticated, but it put my wife at ease. As I go to tie my last corner off at a tree near our tent, our third mystery item unveils itself. It looks like someone has done the same exact thing I have done with a rope that was so old and brown I didn't see it at first. It was broken and only a few pieces remained, but sure enough it was tied at roughly the same height, 8-10 in off the ground, and even had a few rusted washers on it. I immediately felt someone has stayed here before and put the same makeshift warning system on the same tree I am maybe 10 to 15 years ago based on the condition of the rope. Perhaps my paranoia has now reached a new height, but I had to make sure the girls felt we are safe, and at the time the only thing I could think of was when the evening came around I made them sit in the truck and I fired a clip of my .45 into the dirt as a signal to whatever was out there that we are armed. I reassured the girls that anybody listening to that now knows we have 2 wolves and are armed and we are too risky of a target so we can sleep safely. That night we heard no footsteps and the dogs never perked up and barked. We left early the next morning. Fast forward to today and I watched the Amazon Missing 411 Hunted documentary and I noticed the cluster smack dab close to where we camped that weekend and a flood of dread rushes me as I think of that mysterious abandoned campsite with the ripped tent and smashed cooler and cooktop. We have been camping since and have enjoyed the beauty of the NW, but there was something there at that place that possibly took or harmed someone else less than 300 feet away from where we camped, and we all thank our lucky stars Guts was doing his thing so well that afternoon. Update from original posting. Guts is no longer with us. He has journeyed into the next phase and there isn't a day that goes by that I don't think about him and how he saved us. He was a warrior and his new brother Geronimo has his spirit. Stalked and watched in the woods, first time poster, so go easy on me. This incident happened to me earlier this year and I have only told a couple close friends since then. I should mention I had my glasses on at the time and they're weaker than my contacts, so if I wasn't focused, I had trouble seeing. In January, I was still living with my mom. I was at the end of a rough time in my life and would often go on hikes to get out of the house and get some alone time. I would usually use this time to calm down and think to myself. The town I live in is a college town, but pretty safe. Nothing more than a couple thefts here and there. So naturally I felt pretty safe in the woods and had been hiking alone since I was young. Anyways, I went to a state park that can get pretty populated at times. But since I was there in the morning, there was only one other car in the lot. I walked up a trail that encompasses a very large lake. Eventually I found a small gravel clearing with a bench, sat down and lit up a bowl. A couple of hits and I got a sinking feeling in my stomach. The feeling you get when you are not alone. Fearing being caught with weed by someone else on the trail, I casually peeked behind me to see if someone was there. A middle-aged man was on a trail that looked over the lot I was in. Not wanting to look suspicious, I was more afraid of getting caught. I stayed sitting on the bench and waited for him to continue on his way. But he was walking slow. He was shuffling his feet and even walking backwards. His hands were in his pockets and he was fiddling with what I thought was his phone. Basically, he was walking in place. I waited for the man to yell down to me, but he never made a sound. At this point I figured I should just leave, so I started to walk on my trail back to my car. The trail he was on went the same way, but was maybe 4 foot higher and a couple feet away. The man started to follow me. He followed me the whole trail back to my car. Not wanting to escalate anything, I walked fast, but I made sure I didn't run. I was honestly still afraid of getting caught. When I got to the end of my trail, his trail still continued on, but looked down on where my car was. He stopped, so he was facing the passenger side of my car. He was still maybe only 7 feet away. As I fumbled to get into my car, I kept my eye on him. My hands were shaking. He was still playing with his phone. When I finally got the key into the door, I looked up at the man and we finally made eye contact. His eyes tore into me. He was so focused on me that it instantly felt shocked. That was the only time we looked each other in the eyes. I could see his hands moving and I focused to see what he was doing. His pants were unzipped and he was furiously masturbating. Staring me right in the eye and slowly going off the trail to my car. I jumped into my car and started it up, crouched down to look through the window to see where he was. I sped the fuck out of the lot, looking back the whole time in horror. He was still masturbating. He was throwing his head back in ecstasy, and that was the last look I got at him. I was so sickened I didn't know what to do. To think he was just steps behind me the whole time. Most likely getting off at literally preying on me like a fucking hunter. I will never forget how he pretended to walk on the trail. Who knows how long he watched me sit on the bench. I hope I never meet that man again. I got followed in the woods twice, by the same guy. I am a late 20s F and this happened fairly recently. Nothing bad happened to me, but I'm lucky it didn't, and it easily could have. There is a conservation area that I used to like to walk in regularly. It's beside a golf course, near an ordinary subdivision, just off a busy road, and is popular with dog walkers and photographers. The conservation area is fairly well maintained, and alerts its users that there are hidden cameras everywhere. My point in bringing attention to all of this is to say that by all accounts, this is a very safe, vanilla, urban wooded area in a populated area. One big thing about me is that I like isolation to recharge. I dislike crowded trails, and by convention go in off-peak hours, or when the weather is unpleasant. Not dangerous, but unpleasant, too cold, lightly raining, foggy, etc. I stay safe, but I like there to be as few people around as possible. In a city, in daylight, I don't feel like I'm taking any risks by doing this. First encounter, there was one day I went at around 4 p.m. or so on a frigid, rainy Monday in November. On days like that, there are maybe only 1 or 2 dog walkers, but today, there was no car in the parking lot, except for a dirty blue pickup truck with a man sitting in it. I noticed that he was looking at me, but that didn't really bother me. I was just happy to see the trail was empty. On this particular day, I went to the area to practice my navigation skills. I was learning how to use a compass at that time, and it's good to practice that skill in an area that you won't get lost in. So I decided to go off-trail to a big pine plantation, which is a big, open, area with large mature pine trees, if you are not familiar. It's not a hiking area, or really that interesting in any way. And definitely off-trail, you wouldn't get there unless you really wanted to get there. So I pick my first landmark and sight it using my compass, and I'm pacing towards it. I find myself about halfway there when I hear rustling through bushes, and I turn around to see the man from the dirty blue pickup truck there, entering the pine plantation. Mid-50s white man, a little pudgy, wearing a baggy, beige cardigan and blue slacks. I feel pretty alert at this point. Feels out of place somehow. I take note, but pretend to keep walking around with my compass because I don't want to seem weird. I look at him. He pretends to ignore me. I am getting a really bad gut feeling about the situation for some reason at this point, and I feel like he's following me. But I have an anxiety disorder. So I try to not freak out for zero reason, and I don't want to ruin my relaxation time. It's just a guy walking around. No big deal. To see if he's following me, I pivot 180 degrees, and walk directly towards the trail again. He's still following me. I walk through the bushes, onto the trail. Still following me. At this point I was freaked out. The pine plantation entrance is only about 50 feet on the trail, so this guy would have walked 50 feet, entered the pine plantation, then decide that was it for the day. Bad odds. Definitely following me. I quickly exit the trail, and when I'm leaving the parking lot I see that he's still looking at me. I take the long way home. The experience freaks me out. And I only visit the area once before the second encounter. This time was in January. This time, I want to go bird watching. A week prior I had seen an owl in the same pine plantation. I was practicing navigation again, and I wanted to see it again. I had seen it about an hour before sundown, so I figured that was a good time to try to see it again in the same area. I checked the parking lot, and there was no blue pickup truck, but there were 2 other cars with men. One was a red sedan with heavily tinted windows, and it looked like the other one was empty, so I go on the trail again. Today is muddy, wet, cold. Area should be totally empty. Good. Unfortunately, not so. About 20 feet on the trail, I hear footsteps behind me. I don't like when people walk behind me, but it's not a crime and I'll lose them soon when I go to the pine plantation. I'm sure you know where this is going. When I walk on the pine plantation, there is the same rustling of the bushes before, and when I turn around, I see the same man from before. I feel a wave of terror and dread overcome me, alone in a muddy forest with a possible stalker. But it's still so calm, and it feels so mundane. To confirm my fears, I walk over to the area where I saw the owl last week and pause to look for it. Who do I see next to me is the same freaking guy from before. I am terrified at this point, and every part of me is screaming, "Run!" So I walk as fast as I can to the trail again. I pass some other random guy in the same pine plantation and smile at him, just totally on autopilot. He smiles back. It wasn't until I was in the parking lot where I get freaked out that there was a second person in the same pine plantation. Could they have been connected somehow? I stop briefly in the parking lot and take out a small notepad to quickly write down the license plates of the 2 cars. This gives the original man to catch up to the parking lot. I am booking it out, on foot, out of the parking lot, and he yells towards me, "Can I give you a ride?" And I just shake my head and keep walking. As I walk away, he begins to follow me in his car. He waits at the intersection to see which direction I'm going in, and I decide to walk in a busy park to lose him. He pulls into a nearby hidden driveway and stares at me, and takes out his phone to presumably take a photo of me. He notes what direction I'm walking in, then does a U-turn and drives fast the other way, to the random two almost stalkers. Let's not meet.